Ruby Community Conference organized by Visuality presents Obie Fernandez, Ruby and AI Conversation. Enjoy.
Hey everyone. Okay, so what would any tech conference be these days without delving right into the heart of this incredible moment in history that we're currently living in? I believe that it is fair to say, and you may or may not agree with me, but after the end of this talk, hopefully you'll have some stronger opinions about it, that we are living in a singularity. The reason I think we're in a singularity is because I believe that we're transitioning into a phase where AI improvement is becoming self-reinforcing. And I see evidence of this all the time. And if you go looking for this topic, you'll be able to find evidence as well. One of the main sources of actual objective evidence to this happens to be the exponential curves that we're seeing in benchmarks. For instance, this is the Meta long task graphs, which measures how long AI can work on tasks independently. And we're starting to see that the leading edge models work for hours at a time, extremely long periods of time on tasks that they're given before they quit. And there's many, many other benchmarks that begin to show this kind of acceleration on a curve. I'm not gonna, because for time purposes, I'm not gonna get into every one of these, but some of these are quite fun. For instance, humanity's last exam, which you can take yourself to see how you compare to the AI. Of course, extrapolating is dangerous, and we don't know, as many people will point out, if this exponential curve will eventually turn into an S curve, or if there will be dips and things like that. However, all you have to do is get on Twitter. For better or worse, that is the place where you get the most alpha for AI. And it seems like any given 24 or 48 hour period of time, there are just like these shattering kind of developments stacked up one after the other. So for instance, just this week, in the last couple of days, Andrew Karpathy released his auto research project, which is a self-contained repo that sets free recursive loops to improve AI technology. And that's been picked up just, I think, in the last 24 hours by Toby, our favorite billionaire hacker, doing a good job of representing the Ruby community here, I think. So he ran auto research on the Liquid code base, which is the rendering layer that powers hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions on the Shopify platform. And even though he had the caveat that this is probably a little bit overfit, so to speak, he got 53% faster rendering performance from one run of auto research on that code base. I really wouldn't want to be the lead of the Liquid team right now. But this kind of thing, as I mentioned, just in the last couple of days, someone else here applying the same pattern. Again, we're talking about self-reinforcing loops, right? The same pattern to looking for better ways of just doing software in a distributed way. That's what this is. This is basically a networked swarm around the world of different computers that are running this loop and talking to each other and sharing results. Toby Part 2, this was March 10th, so a couple days ago. QMD 2.0 is out. If any of you are using a personal agent and you're not using QMD as one of the cornerstones of how it uses its own folder, you definitely should. Again, the fact that a billionaire of a $120 billion company is the one pushing the state of the art on this sort of thing is kind of remarkable. Gemini embedding 2, you can now do embeddings across video, multimedia. Pencil.dev, if you've played that, completely revolutionizing the way you do design and product management. ERC 8183, standard for how agents are going to be paying each other and transacting with cryptocurrency. And that's just like, a sampling of the last few days. So what this talk is about, really, and I'll do my best to tie it into Ruby, since we're mostly Rubyists here, is to discuss some pretty uncomfortable questions, potentially, that result from the fact that we are in this singularity. And I'm going to go through those questions real quick. One, does software development process matter anymore? And I touched on this in my talk in San Francisco Ruby last year, and I'll revisit it a little bit. Two, does programming language matter anymore? So does it matter that we're doing Ruby or anything else? And I have some interesting thoughts on that, I hope. Third, do you matter anymore? It's kind of like we're going through the steps of abstraction here. And finally, does anything matter anymore? I mean, these are legitimate questions. I mean, I'm trying to be a little bit silly, but also, as Adrian touched on in the intro, some of us are kind of scared right now about what's going to happen, right? The more you know about this stuff, the more scary it becomes. So why am I qualified personally to talk about this? Well, luckily, because I started playing around in an advanced way with this going a few years back, and I actually had an AI company, and actually I did some ML stuff pre-pandemic, and then I came back to it, and I led certain AI initiatives at Shopify last year, and now as of January, I'm CTO of the most powerful Ruby up-and-coming startup that you've never heard of yet called Czar. You will be hearing of us very, very soon. But I'm basically CTO there, and I like to say that we're living in 2028, because the kind of things that we're doing, pretty much anyone I talk to, it just blows their mind. Like, as soon as I know that I'm going to talk to someone about Czar, I know I'm going to blow their mind. I'm not exaggerating. So the reason is that we're doing stuff, and since we're a relatively new startup, we're only a year old, we're able to do things that most companies cannot. So, does software development process matter anymore? And when I say software development process, I'm talking about things like Agile and Scrum. Could be applied to general getting things done kind of processes, shape up, you name it. Briefly, as you well know, processes exist to reduce uncertainty and coordinate humans. However, the reason for these existing, since they're premised on humans, or rather groups of people delivering projects, they have to evolve, or we have to consider what they mean in this future where we're not just teams of people anymore, right? And just to get a sampling, this will also help me customize the rest of the talk. Raise your hand if you work primarily as a single individual, and that's it. You're a team of one. Raise your hand. Okay, I only saw a few hands. So raise your hand if you work in a corporate setting with teams and you have some sort of process and stuff like that right now. Okay, so it's the vast majority of you. That's great, because that means this is actually applicable. Because if you were all Rails bros that were just like working by yourself, a lot of this is kind of besides the point. And if you are working by yourself, like for instance Ryan Carson, who's an old figure from back in the early Rails days, kind of coined the term Web 2.0. He's actually one of the ones leading the charge in terms of what process means when you're a team of one leading a software factory or whatever you want to call it. In this case, recently, he was showing off what it looks like to be building with a set of agents using OpenAI's Symfony product, which, by the way, if you love Elixir, Symfony's written in Elixir, which I think is a big win for the kind of languages that we like. But if we revisit this slide about why process exists, in March 2026, we have to add and their AI agents. I am not actually here. I got to put a caveat in place. If you're still using Copilot right now, and that is your main way of engaging with like code completion, or maybe you're not using it at all, I'm not talking to you. You have already not made it. Sorry to sound a little unhinged and mean, but you need to get with the program. Claude Code and agentic kind of programming is now where it's at, and we're now actually moving to the next level after reactive programming. I'll get into that in a minute. But the reason I'm bringing up that in that way, and again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound mean or anything, and you can argue with me later during the breaks, but basically, this question about whether process matters has to take agents into account. Whether that means the Claude Code instances that you're controlling on your desktop, or it means autonomous AI agents that are collaborating with you. Again, I'm talking to you from 2028. So if you say, hey, this sounds ridiculous, there's no way my company's going to do any of this stuff anytime soon, yeah, I understand that. That's not actually a problem for what I'm saying. There's a spectrum of adoption, and right now a lot of these things I'm talking about are kind of like early adopter stage things, but there's no doubt in my mind that they're coming. The benefits that you see from them are so off the charts that they might as well just be another universe. Reality has completely changed. But trying to bring it back and kind of trying to apply it to things that we still have some tangible hold on. Most of you raise your hands that you work in companies, so you have some sort of process, probably Scrum, sprints, etc. Well, we are faced with a situation over the next few years where our coding agents, whether we're working with them reactively or autonomously, will need alignment so that they don't drift, duplicate work, or miss expectations in the same way that humans need it. The thing is, and what makes this unprecedented, is that they work much faster than we do. So they have different kinds of requirements. The other thing is ensuring feedback, and I had to say here before too many tokens get wasted, one of the reasons that there's an adoption curve is that it's expensive right now to do a lot of these things I'm about to show you. You're potentially talking about setups where a developer is spending an amount equivalent to their salary per month in tokens. This is a problem for smaller players. If you're Shopify, you can afford to do this at scale, and when I was at Shopify last year, I was routinely spending $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 in tokens per month. We had people that were spending $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 in tokens per month. This is like a big deal. Some people say the price of tokens will go up. I actually lived through the original PC revolution and everything that came after it. When I started computing, I was working on 640 KB of RAM. They were very, very expensive in today's dollars. I think it's all going to go down. I think the price of intelligence is actually going to drop precipitously over the next few years. So that means those of you that are not rich enough to actually buy that many tokens, don't worry too much. You'll be all right. In terms of process, and I'll get to the next questions pretty fast, if you have smaller teams, one of the significant effects is that you can spend less time coordinating tasks amongst each other. So going faster unlocks the ability to have less process, and process starts to fade into the background as something that might even be able to be done agentically, autonomously, automatically, passively. Process starts becoming less and less something that is about the rituals that we do on a human-to-human basis, and it starts becoming the machinery, I'll come back to this again and again, the machinery of how your organization works. That last bullet says less time actually coding, which gets us to the next question, which is, does programming language matter anymore? And on this, I'm going to go a little bit faster because I know that Carmina is going to actually go into why Ruby is awesome for programming and AI. But the point I wanted to make about this is that the choice of programming language is more than just syntax. Language choice, and we know this very well as Rubyists, includes a way of thinking, right? Like the vibe, if you will, no pun intended, of how we approach our work. In fact, I think that one of the reasons that Rubyists have a tremendous advantage over most other communities is because of our values. You know, we kind of have that interesting, you know, like happiness angle, developer happiness, conciseness, many ways of doing things, which means that the AI can take liberties in different ways. There's so many things you could say about that. I could probably give a whole keynote on it. But very, very importantly, the language choice also represents a system of conventions and a set of frameworks and communities. And of course, for us, as Rubyists, when we choose Ruby, for the most part, probably 80 or 90% of us, that means we're dragging Rails into it. And actually what we're finding is that convention over configuration is great for LLMs. It's actually fantastic. Compared to the alternatives, which frankly, let's just say that the main alternative would be like JavaScript ecosystem. When you're programming in Rails, your LLM already knows how to do pretty much anything that you want to do. And I don't mean just MVC, I mean the gems that are available. It's going to grab the most popular, most well-supported things. It doesn't have to reinvent the wheel, right? This yields compounding benefits on your productivity. And the reason is that Ruby values are AI values. We have been practicing for this big AI show without even knowing it since Ruby was launched. Readability, expressiveness, and the way that Ruby emphasizes developer happiness is something that provokes a tremendous amount of gains in this world of LLMs. Because everything that frustrates you about your code base also frustrates your coding agents. Everything that frustrates you about your code base also frustrates your coding agents. Most of us are dynamic language biased here, probably. With that caveat, I'll say that looking at TypeScript frustrates me as a human. Types are not written for humans. They're written for compilers. But, and so many people seem to not fucking get this, LLMs are humanistic computers. They process and look at the code the way that humans do. This gives us a tremendous advantage over using typed languages. And in fact, people are starting to do objective kind of research on this particular topic and starting to produce evidence showing that the best programming language for Claude Code is actually Ruby in a lot of ways. And given my premise that dynamic languages are better, you wouldn't be surprised to see that Python is also there very closely, but we still beat them, which I'm very happy about. So happiness comes from expressiveness and clarity. You know, one of the other things that has been my favorite kind of emerging dynamic in this world of Rails is actually winning again, is that you have significant figures who are coming from left field, who really don't have anything to do with the Ruby on Rails community in the same way that, like, for instance, me and DHH have to do with it. For instance, Gary Tan, the president of YC, I didn't have this on my bingo card that Gary Tan would become one of the biggest promoters of Ruby on Rails in the beginning of 2026. To the extent that he's saying, if you love Claude Code and Rails, we would love to fund your startup at YC. So, amazing. All right, get some water real quick. We're going to start getting into some more fun topics and a little bit more existential. Question is, do you matter anymore in 2028? Do you as a programmer matter? And you know, the thing is, if we're heading to a world where there's a network of, let's say, nodes, and you are one of those nodes, you know, that is interacting with the agents, if you felt like a cog in the machine before this came to pass, there is a fear that you might feel even more like a cog in the machine, right? Like you might even feel that you're not needed anymore. And I was talking to one of my engineers about it, and he said, hey, if I become not needed anymore, I'll just go herd goats in my hometown. And I thought that was pretty funny and sweet. I told him, look, I'm going to do my best so that if you do go herd goats, it's because you can actually just do your job while herding. And we'll get to why that might make sense, okay? At the moment, even in 2028, the main thing that we are getting from all these changes is that coding velocity, right? As individuals, those of you that have been playing with Claude Code have probably noticed that you can produce much more than ever before. So if you were a 2x programmer before, you might be a 20x programmer now in terms of just your raw output. And depending on how anal retentive you are about looking at every line of code that you're actually merging, depending on the requirements, let's say the regulatory landscape of your company, depending on how strict your pull request policies are and things like that, you may or may not be getting to the point where you're shipping a lot more code than you used to. That affects code quality, right? So one of the dynamics that we've seen, and this affects whether you are significant in 2028 or not, has to do with whether you know now in 2026 what high quality software code looks like. Not everyone in this room, given the number of people here, I think it's safe to say, know what high quality code looks like. But some of us do, because some of us have been coding for decades or more, right? That's a big advantage. The fact that we know what high quality code looks like means that we're able to judge the output that comes out of it. What are the other factors? Do we know how to write great automated tests? Do we know how to refactor? This affects whether you are going to lose meaning or not, right? In terms of where you sit, where you are participating in the bigger picture, what does coding velocity buy you? I think the main thing is agility, right? If your organization is able to process the need for changes, if it's able to design software as a group that is adaptable, if your deployment processes are agile, meaning that you're able to get software through the pipeline and out to your customers or whoever it is that's using your software, then that coding velocity is actually going to yield some dividends. And you as an individual will be able to actually do more than take longer lunches. Who's taking longer lunches here? Yeah, I see some of you raising your hands. I won't get too much into that, but one of the potential ways that the global economy soaks up all this AI productivity is that people are simply working less. They're spending more time with their kids, with their hobbies, outside touching grass. That's actually a very, very good thing, I think, but I won't go down that tangent. Continuing a little bit on the subject of how you as an individual fit into this bigger picture, has to do with the enhanced business value of what you can produce as an individual when you're developing, when you're delivering a lot more code. It only works if you as an individual know how to make sense of business requirements, and only if you know how to code just what needs to be coded. And with this, I'll tell you a little anecdote from 2028 about something that might happen to some of you in the next couple of years. So I joined Czar as CTO, and amongst the kind of radical things that I did at first, given that I inherited a group of 10 engineers who were distributed amongst back-end engineers and front-end engineers, in my first one-on-one with all of them, I said, hey, congratulations, you are no longer a front-end engineer or a back-end engineer, as the case may be. You are now a product engineer. And the difference between a product engineer and anything else, fill in the blank, is that my main interest is in the results that you bring to the business by the way that you apply your taste and judgment to the product. I'm no longer viewing you as a programmer. I am viewing you as a person, as a human that provides taste and judgment to the equation, who comes up with ideas, who acts as, I said on Twitter the other day, as a chaos monkey. You break us from the tyranny of how the LLM always wants to take you to the median, right? The AI is trained on all of the world's knowledge, and it distills it, has a tendency to distill it to something very average. Our function as humans, and the function of my product managers, is to bring their full brains and their full creative capacities to bear as chaos monkeys. I don't expect them to just sit there and give me the first thing that Claude tells them is a solution to the problem. I could replace them with Claude if that's the only thing they're doing. What I expect them to do as product engineers is to actually be responsible for coming up with cool ideas. And before the end of the talk, I'll give you a little bit of hints as to how you can actually make that work at scale in your organizations. So, briefly, what does coding velocity buy you? And this I can tie back to the fact that we're Rubyists and that most of us use Rails. If we have superior architecture as a result of this coding velocity, we will be able to take advantage of it, right? The thing is, you have to understand those principles, right? You have to be able to apply this raw power that you have with your coding agents to be able to get software through good architecture. And the contrast I can draw here is the difference that any one of us gets when we're using Claude Code to build Rails apps, as opposed to what a vibe coder will get, who is not actually a programmer, when they just whip something up on Vercel and chuck it up into the cloud. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being a vibe coder. In fact, I think that there's this whole topic you could spend a whole keynote talking about, how instead of, pretty much every person in a white-collar job uses Excel in some way as their personal programming environment, to where in the future, pretty much everyone in a white-collar job will be chucking apps up onto Vercel or some equivalent just to scratch a software itch. That's fine. Like, vibe coding, I think, is here to stay. However, there's a big difference between something that's vibe coded, which is essentially going to have the same audience as an Excel spreadsheet, which is mostly one person, maybe a small work group, and actual software, like Avo or any number of things that have to be properly engineered and released into the wild for large numbers of people to use it. So the fact that we have Rails is pretty incredible, to get us there. So in summary, the big takeaway from that is that productive individuals do not make productive firms. And there are actually 7 pillars. If you are taking notes, or if you want to look this up later, you can go searching for these, and you'll find that the elements of institutional intelligence, if you will, that unlock these greater productivity benefits so that they're not limited to the individual, are already being delineated, right? Like, they're already being identified, reified, and so on. And people are starting to talk about these as camps where you can devote innovation, right? Like, you can focus innovation on any one of these 7 pillars and I think get good results. It's one of the most interesting areas, I think, of research when it comes to organizational design of productivity gains that you get from AI. So, for instance, coordination is one of my favorite ones, and it's the one I'm going to talk about the most in the rest of the talk, because individual AI creates chaos, right? And some of you are probably already living through this. If any of you are having trouble with the amount of PRs that are flowing through your organization, and people are complaining about the time that it takes to review them, and like, oh my God, manual review, and like, we're doing too much, that's the chaos that I'm talking about. But institutional AI creates coordination, right? Applying AI at the level of your institution in order to align people so that they're better coordinated actually is one of those unlocks. I mentioned that those are fruitful areas of innovation, and this is part of what makes me so optimistic and so excited about this era that we're living through. And this is really the heart, if you will, of this keynote talk. This is the main thing I want you to take away in terms of the opportunity that all of us have right now, as it is. And this is not hype in the way that you might be used to hearing it, in terms of like, oh, AI is so great, it's so powerful, etc. It's that obviously we're living through a significant revolution, and humanity has been through significant revolutions before. In particular, one that has a great metaphor was the revolution when we went from horse-drawn carriages to motorized carriages. And during that intermediate step, people often call out the horseless buggy stage, right? So as we went from horse-drawn carriages to automobiles, the earliest automobiles looked like carriages, right? The things that you're seeing right now, one of them, for instance, is paperclip, and I'll show it to you in a second, are that fall into the category of autonomous agent orchestrators. They are duplicating, and I'm stereotyping, obviously there's outliers, but for the most part, they are duplicating what are essentially human organizations. And I threw up a little comical representation of like some of the different patterns that you see at scale in the big organizations. This Microsoft one's my favorite one. Paperclip I played with this week. It's an orchestrator that lets, you fire it up and you hire a CEO, so to speak. And then you tell the CEO what you want to work on, and you're the board that the CEO reports to. So I fired this up and I said, hey, I want to do something called Czar Labs. Maybe I want to commercialize some of the software I'm building at Czar. And it was like, cool, I want to hire people. So I started wanting to hire founding engineers and basically building an org chart. But the truth is that this is only an intermediate stage. This is not going to survive. This kind of model, I do not believe will survive any more than this is what you see on the streets now. Because this is limited as a paradigm to the human organization structures that we have. Whether it's Adrian's small company or Microsoft and everything in between, we have all this accumulated baggage, if you will, of how a company is supposed to work. When we talk about zero human companies as a thing, that's a thing people are talking about, like companies that are just made out of AI agents, even the name itself feels to me like kind of like a horseless buggy sort of thing, because it's referring to what you're going for in terms of humans, in terms of the missing humans. What I actually think is the more interesting thing, and it's why I get to the last question, is what comes next after the horseless buggy? What is the Hyundai sedan or Tesla compared to a horseless buggy, right? And this is where we start getting into questions of, does anything matter anymore? Because this world that we're going to is so different, potentially, so unrecognizable that we, during the singularity, can start to kind of lose our bearings about what does it mean. The good news is that the path to AGI, the path to where you would have to start asking those questions of what does it mean, and getting into uncomfortable political questions about UBI and permanent underclass and shit like that, that path is not clear at all. That's the good news. There's no from here to there to AGI. As much as some hype people would like you to think AGI is here, all this stuff, it's bullshit. There are still many kinds of innovations that are not even necessarily possible, as far as we know, to get us to a full AGI human replacement that would no longer require us, that completely deprecates us. Any more than a robot could walk through a physical wall, without breaking it. Like there's no way that could happen with the knowledge that we have, and probably can't. It's just not in the realm of possibilities. The way that we ultimately get to AGI, and I do believe that we will get there at some point as humanity, or as life, if you will, because I think it's the next evolutionary step, may go here, and then over here, and then over here behind this wall, and then all the way over there, and then back. It'll make it the same way that a flatworm, which I think was, one of the flatworms was like the first creature to evolve. I think it's called bicameralism, meaning that it was symmetric on both sides. And that's like one of our earliest evolutionary ancestors. So billions of years ago, there was a flatworm, which we're directly descended from. And that is, that could be where we are on the stage to Einstein, so to speak. But there was a whole bunch of shit that came in the middle that was not obvious, right? Like if you tried to evolve yourself, a flatworm to a human, you're going to have a hard time. There's no direct path. So one of my takeaways, and if you're interested in this topic, there's a great book about it called Why Greatness Cannot Be Planned. This came out all the way back in 2015. It was written by a couple of AI researchers. This book by itself made me super, super optimistic about my role and your role and our role as humans and why we continue to matter. This is one of the main books, I would say, that you can and should read if you're nervous about the future that we're coming into. This is one of the main books that provides an understanding, if you will, of why progress does not go from point A to point B in a direct line, and why some of the most outlandish kind of claims about what AI means to us as humanity are completely undefined yet as to how we're going to get there. And it's also why I think it's the most fun. Since most of you are working at companies, I'll bring this back down to earth a little bit because I'm kind of up in the clouds. And I'm going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is the scaling paradox. So I've worked at small companies and I've worked at big companies, most recently Shopify last year. And there's something that I've learned and that probably most of you have learned, even if you haven't explicitly thought about it yet, which is that even though companies add people because they think that they will get more output out of those people, basically the company ends up spending most of its time just surviving in order to support those people, and the results go down. So, still on the topic of what does anything matter, recently at Czar, I've been saying, what if we reduce headcount in order to enable working in completely different ways? Now, luckily, we're at about 30 people. I'm not looking to do any Jack Dorsey block style, like lay off 55% of the people or anything like that. I don't have to. But if I was to do something like that, it wouldn't be for costs. It would be to reduce headcount in order to work completely different ways. And this is really where this age that we're living in is so interesting. And this is why as a Ruby hacker, I get so excited, is that just like many Ruby gems that you see out there or Ruby hacks, it's often more important that something be interesting than it's true. There's so much Ruby code out there, so many gems, which represent a different way of thinking, a different way of doing something that is not necessarily true in the sense of being the best way to do it. But the cost of learning, the cost of trying things has dropped so dramatically that it really makes this more true than ever, right? You can afford to do pretty much anything that's super interesting because there are no more rules, really. At Czar, I went in and I told everyone, congratulations, you're no longer a front-end engineer, you're no longer a back-end engineer. You're now a product engineer. I had people on Rand's leadership Slack, if any of you might know that, it's a place where, kind of people go to chat about these sorts of things, that told me I was an asshole and that was wrong. That's against the rules. You can't do that to people. And I was like, no, there's no rules, right? I didn't want my code base to be in Flutter anymore, so I told the guys, rewrite it in React Native. And you got 2 weeks to do it. And they said, we don't think that's going to be possible. I said, sure, just use a Ralph loop. If you want to know about that, I wrote a blog post about it. They were 80% done in 48 hours. They got the rest of it done in less than 2 weeks. And we shipped it to production. Again, there's no rules. This is for a significant mobile app that has thousands of users and is in production, and we were able to rewrite it. I wrote about it in a post that went viral earlier this year. What used to take months now takes days. One of the first things that I did as CTO at Czar was to take a few days during my Christmas vacation and to write one of the fundamental pieces of the puzzle that I thought I would need going into my job, which was a knowledge graph, a product called Nexus. And I brought in shit that I was excited about literally 20 years ago when I started Ruby. If you go searching for the earliest stuff that I ever wrote about Ruby, it was about using Ruby with ontologies. And it's one of my most cited scientific papers. In fact, it's my only cited scientific paper. But, basically, I was like, how would I do this? Cool, I'll bring in ontologies and I'll make a graph database and I'll start capturing everything that goes on at Czar. So every Claude Code session, every Slack conversation, everything that goes on in Linear, everything that goes on in GitHub, what else? Everything across the board, meeting transcripts, everything flows into Nexus. Everything gets distilled into entities that represent decisions, learning, goals, ideas, conflicts, etc. Along the way, again, no rules. I was like, I really want high ownership and high agency out of my product engineers. High ownership, high agency people don't work off backlogs. They don't just wait around for us to tell them what to do. Why are we doing roadmaps? Everything's moving so fast. I just need people to learn. I need to emphasize learning, and that kept bothering me. It's like, why are we working off backlogs? Fuck it. Goodbye, Linear. And then afterwards, it was like, there's all this shit going on in Slack, and I need my autonomous bots to be able to just be able to go into Slack whenever I want. I started talking to Slack customer support, and I was like, hey, we have an autonomous AI agent system, and I want to be able to do zero human commissioning of these AI bots so that they're like employees. And they said, sorry, you can't do that. You have to use a human. Okay, goodbye Slack. Screw it. The lack of rules means that the unlock and the fact that everything is changing so much where you have to say, what does it even mean anymore, is liberating. Well, I guess some of you have the personality type where you might find that terrifying, but I find it liberating, and I think it's amazing. I went in and said, okay, we got Nexus, so let's build a system for autonomous agents, and that's what that looks like. So here's an autonomous agent. This is all written in Rails, by the way. Wrote it in 2 or 3 days. It's been running in production great. This is an agent that keeps track of Nexus. It's like a librarian for Nexus. So this is constantly running and figuring out, hey, where do I need to merge things or delete things or clean them up or update? And I'll tell you a really funny story about Corey. When I fired up Corey and Corey came to life, it went through did its thing, and it goes, it messages me over Slack. We were still on Slack. And it goes, hey, So I'm really excited about my new job, and I'm ready to get to work. I've identified some conflicts I want to clean up and some records I want to merge. However, your MCP tools are read-only. They don't have any way for me to do any updates. This is the agent talking to me. So I'm like, that's awesome. Why don't you write a PR? And it's like, cool, do that. It's got access to GitHub. It's got its own GitHub user. So it goes off to work, and it pulls down the code base for Nexus, and it identifies the MCP code in it, and it adds MCP, and it creates a PR, and then it pings me. It's like, awesome, create a PR. I see that popped up. And then I got distracted and was working on something else. And then a couple hours later, I see a message pop up in our engineering channel, which is the team channel. And it's like, hey guys, I'm Corey. I'm the new one responsible for working on Nexus. I think none of you noticed, but I published a PR that I want to review on so I can merge it. So if any of you can look at it. And then everyone ignored it because they had other stuff going on. And 3 or 4 hours later, it was like, hey guys, it's Corey again. So like, I'm still waiting for a review on that PR. Whole different world we're living in. I wanted to give you a little bit of a peek of what this looks like in practice. This is in Mattermost, which is our Slack clone. This was in one of the team channels. So Colin, which is one of our autonomous agents, popped in, and he's commenting on one of the experiments that is running in review, just kind of giving an update. What a lot of these autonomous agents kind of provide to us is that, remember I said the 7 pillars of organizational AI intelligence? This is what you can do with it, with that sort of thing. I've actually built, during my spare time, let's call it, between one-on-ones and executive shit at Czar, a bunch of apps. One of them is called Imperium. Imperium aligns the entire organization. And this is actually what replaced Linear. As I said before, the main thing that I want is for my engineers to be learning all the time. So I said, okay, we need alignment, and we need to give them some sort of structure to be able to learn all the time. So I want to be a unicorn with less than 30 people, and we work on things to make that possible. The fact that we are able to build a system with this amount of sophistication in just a couple of weeks is a testament to the power of Rails and what you can accomplish if you have a clear vision of what you're trying to do. The learning results, and this is actually one of my favorite parts of this whole picture, is that my product engineers are now regularly producing this caliber of presentation as interactive websites when they present the learnings to the rest of the organization. And this is just a screenshot that I took of something that I caught in one of today's meetings where they were talking about a surprise finding from one of their experiments. This is lean startup applied at organizational scale as a way of managing your product engineering. So I'm almost out of time. I want to leave you with probably the main takeaway, let's call it, and what I hope you really get inspired with from this keynote, which is that fortune favors the bold. I feel like from Matt's to Prag Dave, and especially to DHH in the early days, one of the key characteristics that we've shared has been boldness, audacity, that willingness to go out there, to not be embarrassed about being different, to not be embarrassed about being super fucking smarter than everyone else. In the case of people like DHH, you put yourself out there, you're bold. Right now, that leads to so many opportunities. The amount of joy that I'm getting on a day-to-day basis in working this way is off the charts. It's off the charts. I regularly have team members, even though I moved all their cheese, so to speak, even though I've done incredibly disruptive things to their lives by coming in as CTO, regularly tell me, this is fucking amazing. This is mind-blowing, with, the mind-blowing emoji. They are so proud of themselves. I started a Czar Engineering blog, and they've been blogging about it. One of our engineers, who's a very introverted Pakistani, blogged about our React Native rewrite, and he was kind of gushing. He was so proud of what he's doing. It's the time to be bold. It's not the time to be afraid. As a final note, I want to mention that even though I wrote my book, Patterns of Application Development Using AI, over a year and a half ago, I very much did write it with a future-facing kind of look. I'm going to update it as a second edition. It's probably going to get published with a traditional publisher. However, time and time again, I find some of the fundamental patterns that I've identified in that book to be instrumental in helping me understand how to navigate this new world that we're living in, and how to identify opportunities to implement those 7 pillars that I talked about. Key examples would be narrow the path, which discusses how you bring this enormous latent space of opportunities and choices down to manageable directions. Imperium itself is a meta implementation of the narrow the path pattern. Organizationally, I'm trying to narrow this enormous universe of possibilities that my product organization could deliver on down to what they could identify as experiments and learn from. That's a narrowing of the path, which actually makes their job more likely to be impacted positively by AI. The multitude of workers pattern, a way of thinking about AI not as a different kind of programming language or a different kind of computing device, but rather thinking about it as having a near infinite supply of humans that you can add to your processes. Self-healing data, etc. And the good news, which hopefully some of you appreciate, is that it's available in Polish. And if you want to get it for half price, you can scan that QR. So it is available on LeanPub and on Amazon as hard and soft covers. But I hope you've enjoyed my keynote, and thank you very much.
So we'll have time for...
Can you put the QR code back up, please?
Yeah. We'll have time for 3 questions.
3 questions?
3 questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the back.
Can I have this one as well? I don't know how to turn it on. It doesn't have a button. Nah, just a second, because it's... Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, hi, Obie.
Hi.
Nice presentation.
Thank you.
So, I wanted to understand, how does your time at Olympia and Magma Shot and all this work that you've done there with, trying to make AI look like humans and make like coworkers, help you on this journey at Czar right now?
The question is, how does this previous experience that I have, a lot of things that I've done over the last few years were early, and for those of you that are sometimes worried that whatever you're working on is too early, you can use me as a positive example of why that's always not a great way to think. Like, I don't mind that I was early. I don't mind that my first startup was, kind of didn't go anywhere. Because it prepared my mind with the paradigms to understand what was possible. And not only what is possible now, but to give me a very good intuitive understanding of where we're going. Because if you really want to be ahead of the game, you have to skate to where the puck is going, right? As they say in hockey. So I don't know if that answers your question, if you want more kind of deep answer, but I'll leave it at that for now. Over here. One more.
Hello and thank you. That was really inspiring. My question is about the pricing of tokens and how you said that you believe it will be cheaper. Can you help me understanding how you can believe that?
Yeah.
Knowing all the financial reports of the biggest players and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the good news is it's actually come down quite a bit. And for those of you that work for companies that look kind of like Czar, which is like 12 engineers, a couple DevOps guys, a few executives, a couple designers, etc. We're spending less than $10,000 a month on tokens. We have Anthropic's team account. Most of our people are on premium plans, which is $150 a month. We do have overages enabled, which people will occasionally go over, but usually not, believe it or not. We use tools like Ralph to do the React Native rewrite. Those work with API keys. You cannot use those kind of external third-party tools with Anthropic. So in those cases, you are using API keys. The total cost of tokens for our rewrite was about $6,000 in tokens over the course of 2 weeks. I only know that because we blew past our Anthropic billing cap for API keys, so I had to pay attention to it. Other than that, we use OpenRouter as our main provider of inference across the board for all other models. And I've spent less than $2,000 in the last few months on everything else, which is all the autonomous agentic things. It is a lot more affordable than you might think. The kinds of things that I mentioned that we were doing last year at Shopify that were using so much money were like swarm oriented and like very, very heavy API key usage. So one more question.
Okay. Hey, Obie, great presentation. I have a question about Corny, the bot. Do you use...
About what?
The Corny, the
Corey.
Corey, yes. So do you use any agentic framework to create agents like OpenClaw or something else?
No. Rolled my own framework called Agentis. Agora is the main Rails app. We're thinking about potentially open sourcing or commercializing our stack. I don't know if it might be a little bit of a distraction or whatnot. If you're interested in that, talk to me about it afterwards to see, so I can at least know that you're interested. But my recommendation to you guys, and girls, as Ruby hackers, is that there's never been a better time to roll your own harnesses, to roll your own agentic frameworks. A lot of stuff is really, really easy to get into. It can be as easy as like, let's say paperclip, which I'm pretty sure is written in TypeScript, which is that horseless buggy thing that I was telling you that started a CEO and wanted to start hiring people or whatnot. Like, let's say you wanted to create a Ruby version of that using Ruby LLM or my own RayGem or something like that. Literally point Claude Code at it, go, hey, I want to write a Ruby version of this, and just vibe code one shot a Ruby version of literally anything you're interested in, and then just take it off from there. So never been a better time. I don't think you actually need to buy anything. Please, for God's sakes, do not use LangChain, even the Ruby version. But yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you so much, Obie. You gave us a lot to think about. One thing that I took away is be bold. And the second thing, actually, is there are no rules, which is freaking amazing. So, okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to have 10 minutes of break.